Do you regard black magic as being purely fictitious, or is there some truth in it?
Some truth. 100% truth. There is nothing fictitious about black magic, in any way whatever. It is a fact. It is a fact which has existed for several thousand years. I mean, when we talk about black magic, we are talking about Satanism, necromancy, alchemy, witchcraft, the worship of Satan.
Okay, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing the second part of our Tumbling and Ciphering series, and today we're looking at the word Cain in relation to the word cannibal, and the previous part of this video was on the word Baal, so it's an extension to this part. So if you haven't seen part one, then you probably need to watch that before you continue watching this, because it's not going to make much sense. So the word cannibal has two root words, Cain and Baal. We've obviously already looked at Baal in the last part, and we've spoken about that particular name many times on this channel, so we're going to be focusing on Cain and its various different iterations. Now, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with the story of Cain and Abel, but something you may not have known is that Abel is actually an anagram for Baal. So this was planted there from the jump, and Max Spears has previously spoke about how he thinks there may have been some inversion there in that story, given that Abel is Baal. The killing could have actually been done the other way around, but that is probably a topic for a different video. Most people in the quote-unquote conspiracy theory community have heard about the seed of Cain, and many researchers and biblical scholars believe that Cain was in fact the son of the devil and not the son of Adam. This is also known as the serpent seed, and many people also believe that the ruling class and the powers that be are descendants of this particular bloodline. Also, many people think this seed line actually ties in with the Nephilim. Now, here's a quote from a PDF I found explaining this, and I put this PDF up on my Patreon if you're on there, so you can read through all of this. Lucifer, the father of Cain, the concept what had happened in the garden had led to the beguilement of Eve, and that the beguilement resulted in her being impregnated with the firstborn son of the devil, or Lucifer. Cain was not a child of Adam. The fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was not an actual fruit, but was symbolical and metaphorical for a much larger story, and is veiling some very important things. It serves as a skeleton key, which unlocks much more in scripture. It will also help people understand Genesis 3:15, which we'll go into shortly, and it will also tie into the reality of the children of the devil sitting on the throne of the world, and in the connection with the NWO and the global elites being part of this particular bloodline. And in the Bible, we know that Jesus refers to them as being part of the synagogue of Satan, those who are Jews but are not. Now, Genesis 3:15 reads, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." The meaning of this passage has been discussed at length for some time, and this is not a lecture on hermeneutics, so I'm not going to be going into the various different meanings of Genesis 3:15. However, what I will say is that it is clearly about creating a conflict between two different sets of seeds or offsprings. To bring enmity means to create a hostile environment, so if you piece that together with the serpent seed, it paints a pretty clear picture. Biblical scholars also like to mention that in the genealogy of Christ, Cain is actually nowhere to be seen. Now, clearly this enmity that was put between quote-unquote man and woman is not necessarily between the physical representations of man and woman, rather it's an energetic thing, as we will get into shortly. It's the masculine versus the feminine. And if you want to research more on the serpent seed, please do, because it is a really interesting topic, but I need to move on for the sake of time. Now, Cain is obviously the father of the Canaanites, and this is the seed line of Cain and is the origin of the cannibals. Now, if you look to the Bible and we look to why God commanded the invasion of Canaan in the book of Joshua, we can see that they're painted in a pretty terrible picture, as in both Leviticus and in Deuteronomy. They both contain details of the rather questionable acts that they were committing, such as worshipping demonic gods, taboo sexual acts, and the sacrifice of children to their Canaanite gods, which was of course Baal. Okay, so it seems like there's not much different between these people here and these people here. and you can see why people think their lineage is connected. Now that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about on the serpent seed theory, as I've got too much else to discuss, but if you want to look into it, please do. For the sake of this video, all you really need to know is that Cain is tied to the serpent seed, or the seed of the devil, and Cain was the father of the Canaanites, who were known for their questionable acts. Now, as I've already told you, vowels are interchangeable, so we start with the consonants, or the constants, which in the case of Cain would be C and N. Now, numerically, this is 314. Why is this important? Well, this is important because 314 is pi, or the circle. And remember what I told you about the cabal. The cabal is the cable, the thing that starts and connects from beginning to end, a circle, right, which is tied to pi. The cabal are the Canaanites. So can you see how the C and the N fits in there with the 314 and the circle and the cabal? They're both tied to it. And remember, the glyph of the circle is the soul. Now, when you do the same with the word Canaan rather than Cain, you see we get CNN. CNN is simply Canaan. I suppose that makes the news channel hit a little differently now, right? The cable news network, that's basically just the cabal news network. And it's no surprise that cable news network brings us back to the big skull and bones number of 223, and cabal news network sums to 93. Now, I want to draw your attention to a very important character in Freemasonry who was part of Cain's lineage. To be specific, he was 8 generations after Cain, and this is Tubal-Cain. Now, I've previously explained how all of these secret societies work off the same blueprint, and that blueprint is a very masculine one. Masculine in the sense that it prioritizes male archetypes. So if we break down the name Tubal-Cain, we get Tubal-Cain, as in 2 balls and a cane, or 2 balls and a penis. Now his symbol looks like this and is tied to Revelations 17:11, which reads, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition." Now, as you can see here, the cane is the 7, and the 2 balls represent the 8. So when they say he is of the 7 and of the 8, they are quite literally referencing this here. And this same exact symbol can be seen in the Facebook logo. The Facebook logo is quite literally the Tubal-Cain. Now, following this logic, Cain and D are a 4-way match. Again, this should be quite self-explanatory given the current paradigm that we're living in, given that even, most of the women in Hollywood are inverts. So now you can see that the energy of Cain embodies the same energy that has dominated the planet for a long time, which is a masculine one, which is where this comes back to Genesis 3:15, because this is where this enmity comes from, that was placed between man and woman. Rather, it wasn't between man and woman, it was between these 2 separate energies. It was the energy of the phallus versus the energy of the womb. Note, Tubal-Cain is credited as the first smith as well, the first blacksmith. So he creates, and the phallus and the balls are partly responsible for the same act of creation in man. It should also be noted that Cain not only represents the 7, but also L, because when you flip the Cain, you get the L, or the EL, the L, like bow. And this is exactly why Masons adopted this symbol as their insignia, because it represents the exact same thing. Now, there is another version of the 2 balls and Cain symbol that has been used before, and that was by John Dee, who's quite literally the father of the Enochian magic system. He was born on the 13th of July, 13/7, which is the 33rd prime, perfect date for him to be born. John Dee was Queen Elizabeth's right-hand man, essentially operating as a spy for the crown, and he used this sign as his symbol when he used to send his correspondences to the Queen, which was the 007, or the 2 balls and the Cain. And as I'm sure many of you already know, this is actually where the symbol and story of James Bond comes from, with the 007. As previously stated, Tubal-Cain was a blacksmith, or a smith. Now, when we think of a smith, typically we think of somebody creating weapons and creating things that take life. As we know, Tubal-Cain is accredited with being the first smith. Now, when I think of smith, I think of this. And you can see the resemblance between this character here and this character here. Notice the gematria hits in light of the fact that both Agent Smith and James Bond are essentially killers. And we also have the band, the Smiths. All of these are references to the same dominant bloodline. Okay, that is Caine bloodline, the Caine line. Now note the meaning of Caine is smith or a political leader. Now it seems pretty obvious why we have all of these stories about our politicians seemingly reenacting the same things that got the Canaanites destroyed in the Bible. This alone honestly speaks of volumes, and the seed of Cain is very real and our political leaders are tied to it. So we have the cult of Cain, who worship Bel or Baal, the bull, Bull-El for the lack of better terms. And remember, the Cain is also the phallus, and the term Bel End is a slang term for a phallus. And now we know that the black cube, Saturn, El, and Baal are all connected. Well, the cult of Saturn is the cult of Baal, which was seeded by the bloodline of Cain. Cain plus Baal equals the cannibals, which is the cult of the cannibals. Now, another meaning of the word Cain, along with political leader, is possession. Now, this is interesting because they're talking about possession in the sense of an acclamation of wealth. However, there is, of course, the other side of possession that points towards some jinn or archon taking over Cain. However, for the sake of this video, we'll be discussing the definition in its former sense, and this is because you need to understand that the word Cain and the word king are one and the same. Okay, let me explain. Cain's name is derived from the word meaning possession, or a lot, in the sense of an acclamation of wealth. As the firstborn son, he inherited the role of ruler. Now, typically speaking, in the ancient world, the one with the most possessions was the king. Following this logic, every king is a Cain. And the same goes for the word Khan, which means leader. They're all derivations of the term Cain. And there are a lot of ways that you can dive into a word, but we really need to look into its etymology to understand it in its fullest sense. I mentioned earlier that Canaan was linked to CNN because of the consonants. We can see that if we start putting vowels in there, we get Conan. Conan is simply Canaan. That's why Conan the Barbarian is a fitting title, because the Canaanites were barbarians. Now, what is the Hebrew word for king? Given that Cain means king, the Hebrew word for king is Melech or Moloch. Yeah, remove the vowels, MLCH, the bull god. See how this all ties together? Now think about this. Whoever chose the name Martin Luther King clearly knew about all of this very well, because just as I've just said, the Hebrew word for king, which is obviously his surname, is Melech. Now in Hebrew script, it would obviously be written without vowels, so Melech is MLK. Just to add, MLK numerically is 13, 12, 11, which sums to 36, which is a reverse of 93. And we know that the 36 triangular number is 666. And you know that this knowledge permeates all facets of existence, because there's even a Dutch airline company called KLM, which is just MLK in reverse, and their logo is the crown, to obviously signify the king. So now you know that all these characters that they like to present us with in the entertainment industry are all tied to this same seed. These are a few, there are a lot more. Now before I switch this video off, I want to look at Michael Caine quickly, who was the butler from Batman. We'll look at the word Baphomet in the next part because it ties to Batman. Not only that, but he was recently played by Christian Bale. Yeah, it's all in the names. Bale and Caine. Christian Bale and Michael Caine. Honestly, once you start to see this shit, it's all over the place. And what I was going to say is, as I've mentioned, you can tell a lot from dates and years that people are born. We can see that Michael Caine was born in 33. I mean, I don't really need to say anything about that. It's a prominent number. We just spoke about John Dee being born on that date. Well, Michael Caine was also born on the 14th of March. Write that out, 14/3 or 143. Remember, CN is 3.14, which is pi, 143. So the day he was born is simply 3.14 rearranged. That's a direct relation to Canaan. Even if we remove all of the vowels from Michael, we are left with MCHL again, which is an anagram for Moloch. Every Michael is a Moloch. And it's all in the words. They're playing games with the words. It's in a giant script and you can pull it apart. And my final point before I do lock this off is that Michael Caine is also a Sir. And I have an entire separate video coming up for what a Sir is. However, all you really need to know is that switch that I out for an E. Sir should really be spelt with the S-E-R, because this is short for serpent, i.e. the serpent seed of Cain. So every Sir is a serpent, and that's because they've been knighted, or knighted with a N-I-G-H, in that sense, initiated into the darkness. But I will get more into that in my next video.